Hi, Patrick. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
So, how's everything?
It's all good. I'm here in London. Um, yeah, the weather's horrible as usual, but uh, it's
I
slowly
mean,
getting
New
back.
York, the sun is beautiful out. It's
Ah,
great,
really?
great weather. We're
Amazing.
lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, I miss New York.
Yeah, it's a good place to be, and a much better place now compared to a couple of months ago, I can tell you.
Great.
But great to be chatting with you. Maybe we should start making a quick introduction to our audience on
Yeah.
what we do. So, tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Patrick McDowell, a sustainable fashion designer based here in London, and I have a focus on education and system change to make things that have a positive impact on people and the planet. And that includes things like working with brands on different sustainability projects, working with schools for education, and also working on a new initiative that I'm doing with Patrick Duffy from Global Fashion Exchange and um, Lablico called the Swap Chain, which is all based around uh, the swap shops, which we first did at London Fashion Week in February, which is how I came to know um, you from Arch and Hock.
Exactly. Yeah. So indeed, we got to know each other through London Fashion Week. You're fighting for the good cause within your activities, and we do the same. Just a different thing we're occupied with, which is clothing hangers, as you know, of course. So Arch and Hook was founded a couple of years ago, and we really are focusing on making a change through sustainable clothing hangers as an alternative to a lot of bad materials, single-use plastics, etc., being used in the retail and especially fashion retail industry. So indeed, London Fashion Week. So we basically supported the swap shop and supplied you with some hangers within our blue category. Can you explain a little bit what the swap shop event was and the initiative and what's happening around that topic?
Yeah, so it's kind of allows people to rethink the way they experience clothing because you bring a piece with you and you swap it for a piece that we have on the rails, and it's all linked to a blockchain system with barcodes that you can really easily scan to trace the ownership. And that was my collection for the Fashion Week in February. So instead of presenting a collection of clothes that I'd made, I presented a collection of swappable pieces that had been donated from designers and members of the British Fashion Council. And then so it was always like a curated swap event, which then evolved and changed throughout the whole kind of period of Fashion Week. And it was really interesting as a designer to say I'm doing a collection, but it's you know I'm doing it in a completely different way, and people can come and experience it and try it on and take it away with them, which I think often fashion weeks are very kind of you observe and you don't touch. And this was a really nice opportunity for people to actually get quite involved and interactive with something that was on schedule.
Well, indeed, I can imagine it really sparks the conversation, right? You have a very different interaction with the people than you would when you do a show. I could imagine.
Yeah, completely. And even the length of time, like shows last for such a short time, and even presentations are only a few hours, whereas this lasted for the whole of the fashion week. So it went on for like 4 days, and people kind of revisited it, and the stuff that you saw on the second day was different to the first day, and the same with the third day. So everything was always evolving and changing, and it was I found it I wasn't sure how people were going to respond to it, but it actually had it was a great success in the end.
Excellent. And then that's sort of an initiative that you're taking further than London Fashion Week, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So now it's launched into its own business called the Swap Chain, and that's, yeah, it offers people the opportunity to swap digitally and have in-person events, but everything is all tracked by this technology which allows you to trace the ownership, and it's quite exciting, really.
It's a movement.
It is a
You could
movement.
say, yes.
Yes.
Totally. So let me ask you something, because obviously by trade you're a fashion designer, and
Yeah.
so we at Arch and Hook we believe that the hanger is very important to do a service to the clothing, to the garment itself, and we put a lot of effort into design. We connect basically design and sustainability with our products. So can I ask you as a clothing designer, because I think a hanger is oftentimes seen as a commodity, a forgotten item. I'm curious what your opinion is around that topic.
Yeah. I mean, especially in terms of the swap shop, we actually put the scannable barcodes on the base of the hanger. So it's super important that everything has the same message. So just as a designer usually would want the hangers to have the same visual appeal as their clothes in a store, it's important as a sustainable design that everything that you do, including the hangers and the rails and the space, everything is done in the most sustainable way possible. And it's really nice if the thing that those clothes are kind of literally hanging on can be a non-harmful product as well, because I think, like you say, they are sometimes forgotten, but through that it then is a huge source of waste, and it's a massive issue. So especially kind of pre-store, because I think people assume that those really lovely hangers in some of the nicer stores are what the clothes arrive on, but as you'll know, clothes always arrive on disposable plastic hangers, which I think are hardly ever recycled.
Yeah, that's indeed the whole idea behind our blue collection. So we developed it as a solution to the single-use hangers that are predominantly used for transport from garment manufacturers to the retail markets, to the stores. And polystyrene is one of those materials that is predominantly used there, which requires virgin plastic to make a hanger. I mean, you can recycle polystyrene, but you always need to sort of reinforce the material when you go through a recycling process. So you're constantly using petroleum-based plastics. And so we launched blue as an answer to that. So it's not a single-use plastic. It's a much higher grade quality of thermoplastic. But besides that, it's 100% recycled content and then 100% recyclable after use. So I think that story obviously really ties into what you stand for
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, I thought you wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry. I think there's a delay on the a slight delay.
Yeah, well, this is the new era, right? We're in the Zoom and Google Hangout era where we cannot sit together anymore. But I mean, it's a miracle that we can have a good conversation here. Yeah, and so that's what we think about with all the programs that we develop, is how can we make things more sustainable. And blue is ocean bound plastic. It's a mixture, actually, ocean bound plastic, marine plastics, and post-consumer waste, 100% recycled. And yeah, that's basically the solution. Problem though with those type of things, I think it's great to to look for these new ways of coming up with sustainable alternatives. Is also, you want to kind of prove that the solution that you're offering is actually sustainable. It's just that certification around a lot of these topics don't really exist yet. So we are an FSC certified company. FSC certification is an international body, chain of custody, from really the growing of the woods up until the supply of the end product to the customer. But that didn't exist decades ago. That's a new development. And for plastic, it doesn't really exist, at least in our field. So we're trying to navigate that to be able to prove to our client base basically that that our product is the right alternative. But how is that for the fashion industry? Because you're really the sustainable fashion designer. Do you run into those issues often?
Yeah, I mean, it's always, I think definitely for designers, there's a lot of gray areas because there isn't necessarily certifications or kind of industry standards. So you can a lot of the time say things that maybe don't have the same integrity as someone who's doing it properly. Which is sometimes an issue, and you see that when you see kind of like fast fashion brands having like sustainability things going on. I think with fabrics it's happened a lot quicker, and there's a lot of certifications now for different types of fabrics, and that gives a good kind of industry standard for how to grow things in a certain way, and how to have closed loop, non-toxic systems, etc. So yeah, I think they can be important to just set that level of where people need to be at, because I think definitely designers, especially now, could benefit from having something that some kind of level where you have to get to before you can start using certain terminology.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
How important is sustainability to your collaborators?
I mean, the people I collaborate with tend to come to me for kind of sustainable based projects. So the side I see is always very much to do with that. But I'm aware for everyone at the moment, it's a very, I think a lot of people use quite scary wording when they talk about sustainability, and I think that kind of scares quite a lot of people off. But I think it can be quite fun, and I hope I show that through my work as well, that it can be fun and engaging. And I think that's also the perk of the swap chain, is that it's a fun, accessible, easy way for people to engage in sustainability that's not all these kind of big, scary statistics and things that you can't really wrap your head around. It's literally you're taking something you don't wear anymore and swapping it for something else, and it's such a simple transaction that that allows you to do good in the world. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things about it. Yes.
In that regard, do you see, because you're active in different markets, right? I think predominantly in Europe and North America, I guess, right? That's your most common. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So do you see a difference between those geographic areas?
Yeah, I think I've noticed more, let's say, appetite for it in Europe than in the States. But I think the States is catching up now. But I think, and obviously it's different in different parts of America, but I'm generalizing. For example, in California, in LA, there's quite a big push into it, as you'd expect. But I think on the whole, especially if you look at fashion weeks, New York Fashion Week hasn't necessarily been as quick to jump as the other major ones have been. And that's probably because New York Fashion Week traditionally is slightly more commercial than the other ones. And, that's maybe a reason why. But I think at the end of the day, if you're implementing these things into your business now, then your business won't really exist in the next kind of 10 to 15 years, or certainly won't exist as it does today. So it really is in everyone's best interest to put these things in place. You know, I have said before, if you, even if you really don't care about the planets at this point. So, you know, yeah, basically, yeah, I think it's important. But how have you found it with Arch and Hook, with the difference between those markets?
Yeah, so I guess it's a little comparable, but it's also different for us. So we and I didn't mention that earlier in the conversation, but we have our headquarters in Amsterdam. So that's where our base is, and I'm originally from the Netherlands as well, which probably put me on a more European track from the start. But we're a global company, and just making that comparison between Europe and the United States, I do agree with you that I see that Europe has been more on the forefront with this topic. Our target audiences are generally retailers and brands, and I think there's a difference there. So I think in general, brands are obviously much more focused on their brand values, probably more in touch with what also their target customer, which is the end consumer, what those audiences are looking for. So I guess brands are a little more a frontline when it comes down to sustainability as well, and it seems like retailers are trailing more. And then indeed, I do see, as I mentioned, that there seems to be more appetite in Europe, as you already mentioned as well. And I think that's a really interesting thing. I mean, sustainability managers have been involved in processes. My experience is for the past 10 years, but they were definitely not the key decision makers 10 years ago, at least with the majority of companies. And that has really changed. Technically every project that we discuss nowadays, or maybe not every, but 8, 9 out of 10, we have sustainability people involved as well. And it might be because they also come for us because we are the sustainable alternative. But I think in general, for sure, it's definitely what the general audience is looking for. We see that press has become much more verbal around this topic as well. We've seen, well, you're in the UK, we've especially seen this in the UK as well, that retailers were called out for their mall practices around sustainability. So there's more pressure, and I see that as a great positive. Now, putting it into perspective now, today, with COVID-19, we're in the middle of that, right? I think in the long run, it will be positive because I think people are realizing that everything is interconnected, and we're in this situation also because we're not taking care of our earth. But at the same time, the short-term response from a lot of companies is that they really have to focus on their bottom line. It's all about cost reduction, apart from the whole, the whole situation around PPE, where a lot of waste is created, obviously with single use face masks and those type of things. But I do see our clients focusing more on costs than sustainability at the moment. And I think in the long run that will, will probably change. Let me put it this way. I mean, we see it as our responsibility as a supplier to come up with solutions that do both. So affordable alternatives that are sustainable. So that's, it's interesting times, definitely a development towards more sustainable practices, which I think is, it's great. It cannot go fast enough for us, obviously.
Definitely. No, I think it's, I think the next few years are going to be a very interesting time to see how businesses evolve and change, I think.
Absolutely. What is your feeling? Well, I don't want to say your prediction, maybe your hopes for the future of fashion. Maybe you can, Ideas?
I suppose from like a designer level, I'd like to see designers using their roles and brains to redesign all points of their businesses rather than just designing the clothing. And also seeing a space that becomes a bit more about education and using fashion weeks as platforms to showcase new ideas. For example, like the British Fashion Council did with the swap shop. Because I think really fashion weeks they're about showcasing new things, but I think for so many years it's just been about new clothes, whereas now it can be about new experiences, new ways of learning, and it's just giving people that space to kind of unlearn what they've and allow themselves to become more accustomed to these kind of
Sorry, I lost you for 1 sec. You said it takes effort for people to unlearn themselves, and then we lost you for a second. There was a glitch.
Yeah. So I was just saying, basically, we just need to have these spaces in fashion where people are able to unlearn and relearn in order for things to move forward, I think.
Yeah, and I think also you're hearing me, right? Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the connection was a little. That's what we have now. You say learning or relearning. I think it has a lot to do with indeed interaction and education. So you don't know what you don't know, right? So I think to exchange information, to try to dig deeper to get the truth behind things, to really learn how to develop better practices is a process. And I mean, for us as a company, of course, we're a commercial company, so we want to sell product, but at the same time, we'd rather sell one hanger that does the same as 5 short-term hangers do. That's kind of the way we approach this. And so we put a lot of effort into researching this industry as well. So actually we just currently are researching, and we have an independent researcher engaged for that project, is we're finding out how many hangers, plastic hangers, are actually produced on an annual basis, because there's no information on that. And companies are just, they have these structures and processes that are ongoing, and it's really difficult to stop that or halt that and change that. The relearning of your behavior type on a bigger scale. So we I think need to understand what is the bigger scope and what is the real truth around single-use plastic within our industry. Everybody has their own focus, but for us it's within our industry, and it's just for us to understand, but it's also for the fashion retail to understand what the impact is that we have as an industry. But I think, and maybe this is also COVID-19 that has been an accelerator with this as well, with all these Zoom calls and webinars and panel discussions, is that there is really a desire and a need to have this exchange of thoughts, maybe not only within your own industry, but also across industries, and learn from each other to do better for the future. And so I think that interaction is something that we direly need and need to continue to improve our practices going forward.
Definitely. I think that's a really good note to end on. I think
we need to stay open-minded.
Open-minded and learn new things. That's it.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. Yes. Well, great. It was lovely chatting with you this morning, your afternoon.
Yes. Thank you, and thanks everyone for watching as well. And please leave any questions in the comments, and we'll be able to get back to you.
Exactly. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers, Patrick.
Bye.
Bye-bye.